What is going on, everyone? So I've been doing a lot of these late 2018 reviews, and I didn't want to go out and just get brand new phones. I actually might end up doing it, but I kind of want to take a step back and look at phones that we've already done a review on earlier this year and kind of do an updated review on it, kind of see, is it still worth it? Is it not worth it? Did anything change? And for a phone like this, not much has changed from that initial review, but we are about to get a new Android version, so could potentially lead to more custom ROMs and things like that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at the Galaxy S5 and see how it holds up in the later part of 2018. Now my voice is being a little weird, so we're just gonna have to bump through it. If you guys have issues with it, just talk to my accountant. He's the reason it happened. I was shouting at him, he's being weird, but the Samsung Galaxy S5 came out in 2014, and really looking at it, you would have probably thought it came out around probably 2014, just because it actually came out then. It has a lot of bezel around it, and it's weird because going from the Galaxy S4 to the Galaxy S5, they actually added more bezel, which kind of weirded me out, and I think the Galaxy S4 looks better than the Galaxy S5, but I mean, it is what it is. It's really not that big of a deal. The body is actually pretty interesting though, because you do have a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED screen up top, and it's actually 1080p. So technically speaking, this phone will have a sharper screen than the iPhone XR. I hate to throw shots like that, but man, I gotta say it, dude. It's only the truth. You also have capacitive buttons on the bottom. You also have a fingerprint sensor, and I'm not a huge fan of the Android counterparts of fingerprint sensors, and this one was a little bit weird because you actually had to kind of like swipe down a little bit to use it. So it wasn't like you just rest your finger on it, you have to like kind of swipe down a little bit. Not that big of a deal. I still prefer Touch ID, but we're kind of moving away from that stuff, so I'm kind of sad about it, but you know, what are you gonna do? On the bottom we have a charging port, which is actually a little bit bigger. I don't know what the name, I think it's USB 3.0, I don't really remember, but there is a flap to it. This phone was a little bit dust and water resistant, so if you dip it in water, as long as that flap is closed, you probably would be good. But again, I probably wouldn't test it. So it was IP67, a dust and water resistant, so you can go up to 1 meter for 30 minutes, I believe, as long as that flap is closed, so then you'll be good. But also on the back, we do have a removable bag with a removable battery and a removable storage as well. So super cool. I'm super glad they kept it or like used it at the end of it. They eventually removed all of those things on the next version of their Galaxy S series, which was a flop, but I'm glad this phone had it. But we will kind of talk more about those aspects in a second. But let's kind of go through, I mean, I would say the impact that this phone had was pretty positive, but the overall feeling of the body wasn't 100% perfect. Even though it had a removable back and everything, it was very plasticky. And this was the same year that the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus came out. And I guess the main rivalry between this phone and the other phone was actually the iPhone 5S. And this phone was much bigger, and I would probably prefer the Galaxy S5 over the 5S. But eventually when the 6 and 6 Plus came out, that's when Samsung went ahead and added the glass back and everything. But in terms of the premiumness, this phone doesn't feel extremely premium at all. It's very, you know, kind of budget phone-ish, especially when you consider in all those bezels and everything. So it doesn't feel the best, but that still shouldn't deter you away from getting it, just because it does offer a lot for, you know, what it is. Now this phone actually started off getting Android 4.4.2 KitKat, and it was upgradable to Android 6.0 Marshmallow, so it had kind of a long lifespan, you know, considering other Android phones, which usually only get like one version. So it got 2 different versions, which is pretty good, but still not good enough. And considering the fact that the iPhone 5S came out, you know, a couple months before this and is still getting supported is insane to me. And I mean, I'm kind of sad that the Galaxy S5 wasn't even getting Android Nougat. Samsung wasn't really notorious of doing that, but I mean, I would have still have loved to have seen an extra version of Android on this thing. But like I said, with a lot of Androids out there, you are able to go and throw a custom ROM on it. You are able to root it and ROM it, and you are able to do that with this phone as well. And there's a huge ROM community out there, and luckily, I'm glad I'm doing this review and updated review now. There's going to be a lot of Android 9.0 ROMs coming out very, very soon. There's already a ton. I don't know if there's a Galaxy S5 ROM out, there might be, but since Android 9.0 hasn't like officially came out yet, I still think it's a very decent consideration, especially when you consider like if you root in ROM it. When I had my Galaxy S5, I did end up rooting and ROMing it, I believe, but I don't know if I threw a custom ROM, and I definitely rooted it. And I went to throw an Android 9.0 ROM on my Nexus 5 and my LG G2, but they couldn't flash properly, so that was very weird. But I guess it's okay. But that's kind of the saddest thing about these Android phones, is they never get supported for that long. Now, in terms of the performance and specs of this phone, it had the Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 chipset, it had a quad-core CPU clocked at 2.5 GHz, the Adreno 330 GPU, and 2 GB of RAM. And with those specs, I'll be honest, it wasn't really the best, even, you know, within like the last 2 years. I would say even when it was supported, it probably wasn't the best. It was the best when it came out, but then it kind of tapered off. And I wouldn't say the performance is amazing right now, but I don't think it's horrible either. I mean, I think the Adreno 330, from what I read, wasn't really the best and had a lot of issues with it. And when you factor in the 2 GB of RAM, I mean, that's not really a lot for an Android device. For an iOS device, it's sufficient, But with the Android device, it takes up a little bit more energy and more RAM to do the same tasks on iOS. And I mean, they weren't really trying to future-proof this phone, I'll be honest, but they kind of did at the same time by putting in the removable battery and the removable storage. But I would say the performance is very más o menos. It's not the best. It's very middle of the road. It's probably, I would say, like a 5 out of 10. But when you consider the age of this phone, I mean, I would probably say the iPhone 5S performance is probably like a 5.5, 6 out of 10 as well, probably a little bit less. It's just the fact that this phone did have the extra gigabyte of RAM, the 2 gigabytes of RAM. I think really helped this phone out a little bit more. But the fact that apps and games and all these things are getting more and more intensive, you kind of want to future-proof yourself a little bit. If you're not a huge, performance-heavy person, if you don't use a lot of apps or anything like that, you could probably get away with it and you're probably not going to have any problems with it. But it still is kind of sad to see that happen with a phone like this, to not be the best in performance. But just keep in mind, if you do end up custom ROMing it or anything like that, usually you can tweak the performance a little bit. I think you have to flash a custom kernel, so that is kind of an advantage to rooting it and ROMing it. I mean, you're not going to be able to put like an extra 10 gigabytes of RAM or anything, but you are kind of able to overclock it a very little amount, but it could be enough for you. So that is just a small consideration if you're considering getting this phone as of like the late 2018 era. And in terms of gaming and everything, I guess it'll be okay. Like I said, it's very middle of the road, but that's kind of the best area I can leave it in. Now looking at the back, we have a 16 megapixel camera and it's very decent. Again, it's not amazing anymore, but I mean, you are able to shoot 4K videos at 30 frames per second, which is pretty good. And you're able to shoot 1080p videos at 60 frames per second. So those are two respectable formats. I mean, if you think about it, the iPhone 6 was not able to shoot 4K. The 2015 flagship of the iPhone 6S was able to do it. So that is kind of cool that they did that on this phone. And I think this camera was very decent, but looking at it in the later 2018, I don't think it's amazing or anything. I think it's very good. I'd probably say like a 5.5 out of 10, 6 out of 10. It's respectable for the era that it came in, from 2014. You don't really have too many features like 4K at 60 frames per second or 1080p at 120 or 240 frames per second. Photos do look okay though, so I mean, if you're not a photo heavy person, I think you'll be fine. But I don't really have too many complaints with it. The front camera is actually 2 megapixels, which is pretty funny. It's kind of low. And when you factor in the fact that like a lot of Android phones do have the reputation of not having very good front cameras, it is kind of sad that they did this, but again, it is what it is and you can't really go in and change it. I never use a front camera that much because I'm kind of ugly, so you might be in the same boat as well and you probably don't use it, but just know that the front camera is 2 megapixels. Now the best part about this phone, like I said, is that it does have a removable battery and removable storage as well, but the battery life, I would say, is very middle of the road. Now the reason I say that is because it is a 2,800 milliamp hour battery, but you kind of do have to factor in the removable aspect of it. So right now it is 2,800 milliamp hours. Honestly, if you get a phone used, it's probably not going to be the full 2,800. It's probably going to be down to like 2,300 or even 2,000. So that might be a reason why you're not getting that good battery life on a Galaxy S5. But again, it is removable, so you can go in and throw in a 3,000 milliamp hour battery if you want it. Or I've seen some batteries that go up to like 4,000 or 5,000 milliamp hours. I don't know what they're called, the power bears or something like that, but I will leave a link in the description if you want to pick one of those up. And those are really, really cool and they're very respectable and I love those a lot. If I were to get a phone that had a removable battery at all, I would definitely consider the option of putting in a bigger battery. I'm a person who likes the battery sizes bigger and it would only make sense for me to do that. So the stock battery life is okay if it's brand new. If it's a fresh stock battery, then yeah, 100% it's going to be, I guess it'll last you throughout a day maybe. But putting in a bigger battery is just something that I would immediately do and I would really highly encourage you guys to do it. Now some other notable things to note, like I said, it does have a fingerprint sensor. It's kind of weird. I mean, it's a fingerprint sensor, like it'll work, I guess, but it's kind of weird. From what I know, you had to swipe down your fingerprint sensor on the front, like I said earlier. So if that kind of bothers you, then kind of stay away. It does have a little bit of dust and water resistance, IP67. I believe as long as that flap is closed, like I said, you're good. So this phone does have wireless charging, but I think you have to have the certain back on the back of it to enable it. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. I never even use wireless charging on my iPhone 10. You do get a Super AMOLED screen, which is super awesome and I like it. You do keep the headphone jack, which is a good thing if you use it, unless you use like AirPods or something, but if you have an Android, you're probably not using AirPods. And all that good stuff. So is the Galaxy S5 worth it in 2018 or the later part of 2018? I will probably say yes in some ways. To about 10% of people watching this, I would even consider it an option. And out of those 10%, I would probably say like 2% of those people should consider a Galaxy S5. And this is the person I would recommend it to. If you're someone who is comfortable with having an older device and not being as stable as a newer device, if you're not afraid of viruses or malware or anything like that and software updates, and if you don't care about having the latest and greatest features, I guess a Galaxy S5 isn't that bad, but even narrowing it down, so that's probably like 10% of you watching this, to narrow it down to the other like 2%, if you're comfortable enough and you know enough to root and custom ROM your phone, I will say this phone is a very decent option. It's not, I would not recommend it to everybody, but if you're comfortable doing that, I don't know if there's an Android 8.0 ROM out for it, but I think there is. And I would really recommend you guys to, if you were to get this phone, if you fall in that 2%, that you're comfortable with giving up some features and having the latest greatest and the possibility of getting a virus or malware on your phone and having the not the most secure device, and also rooting and custom ROM your phone, I would 100% recommend this phone to you guys. Just because you are able to root and custom ROM it, and that'll allow you to get way more features, and in some cases, some ROMs do offer more than what even new TouchWiz ROMs offer, like Android 9.0 or Android 8.0 TouchWiz. So in some cases it's cool, and I would kind of be in the same boat. I mean, I would definitely re-get a Galaxy S5. If I had like $50 to $100 to spend, I would probably consider it, but I could probably get a way better phone. But you could probably find one for like 60 to 70 on eBay or something. I will leave a link in the description for Galaxy S5 on Amazon if you want to pick it up. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're a lot more safer to get, and you don't have to worry about like eBay's things and all that stuff. And if you want to pick up the extended battery as well, I'll leave a link down there too. But that is pretty much it. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave it down in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber we get really does count, so it'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, Lo-Fi Alpaca. That is also linked down there if you would. I would love you if you could subscribe to that. I do a lot more like iOS reviews and iOS comparisons and iPhone stuff, but I do talk occasionally about Android stuff too. If you want to hear more of me and different opinions of me, definitely check out that second channel. I'd really appreciate it. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.